let's say our la'asok b'divrei Torah blessing together. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. Okay, so we start off with our title, What is Shemini Atzeret? And a picture that we'll come back to later, Maya prays for rain. So what this has to do with Shemini Atzeret, we will discuss as we go along. All right, get rid of the fundraising requests. There we go. So, a Jewish joke. On what holiday do we eat mini muffins for breakfast? Shemini Atzeret.
That's funny.
So if this appeals to you, you're welcome to make this your actual custom. I had muffins in the sukkah this morning.
That's funny.
Okay, on one foot. Shemini Atzeret is a Jewish holiday in the fall. It's the 8th day after the 7 days of Sukkot. It marks the beginning of the rainy season in the land of Israel, which was super important because unlike Egypt and Mesopotamia, there were no major rivers to overflow and help the crops grow.
Wait. Egypt has no major river.
No, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the Nile overflows.
Israel has no major river. Egypt has the Nile, Mesopotamia has the Tigris and Euphrates.
Okay, all right, so I saw it wrong. Okay, sorry.
So I will tweak that wording before I send this out. Important in Israel. Okay.
Okay.
So what is Shemini Atzeret? So Shemini Atzeret, which has multiple ways of spelling it, is the 8th day at the end of Sukkot. It means the 8th of gathering, literally, or sometimes you'll see it as the 8th day of assembly. And it comes from this idea that the 8th day of Sukkot is one more day of gathering together, either with other Jews or with God, different ways of looking at it. In biblical times, Sukkot was a pilgrimage festival when the Israelites would gather in Jerusalem, and Shemini Atzeret was at the end of Sukkot. So that was a day of gathering in Jerusalem. Today, it's a holiday of gathering in synagogue and with other Jews and or non-Jews for holiday meals. So it's still a day of gathering, even if it's not in the temple anymore. The word atzeret comes from the Hebrew root atzor, which can either mean stop, like la'atzor in modern Hebrew, or stop and gather, which was more of the biblical Hebrew meaning. So at this point, what questions are there about Shemini Atzeret? Or about anything we've talked about so far?
Well, does a stop mean to make sure you do it? Is that why it's?
Yes, it's a day of stopping from our
Other activities?
From our regular like everyday routines.
Okay, I got it.
What's our source that this should be a holiday?
So
Dave, is Shemini Atzeret then technically not part of Sukkot, or is it the 8th day of Sukkot, or does Sukkot end with Hoshana Rabbah on the 7th? I've always been a little confused about that.
Yes, and it is. We'll talk more about this, but the short answer is that it is the 8th day at the end of Sukkot, but it's technically its own holiday, which comes at the 8th, which comes after 7 days of Sukkot.
So, David, if it is stop what you're doing on the average day, if you will, and gather,
yeah.
And if that's all it is, how does that differ from Shabbat, which we do the same thing? We stop our normal day activities and we gather together at the synagogue on Shabbat.
That is a good question.
Yeah.
I think because it comes once a year, it is meant as a bigger opportunity than just our regular Shabbat gatherings, particularly for meals. So it's easy to get into routines of saying, on Friday nights, I have Shabbat dinner with whoever you have Shabbat dinner with. And Shemini Atzeret, because it's not in routine like Shabbat, it's an opportunity to say, this is a holiday. It's different from regular Shabbat. Who do I want to actually make the effort to gather with this time? So
Thank
to
you.
be a little bit more intentional about your gathering choices.
I have
Okay.
I have an alternative point of view.
Sure.
Shabbat, as a rule, not in all cases, sometimes Shabbat is at the end of, or the beginning of, or even in the middle of holidays. For example, it was in the middle of Sukkot now, right? Shabbat was Chol Hamoed.
Mm-hmm.
But off in the normal course of a year, Shabbat is more generally and more usually the seventh day after 6 days of labor. And
Mm-hmm.
and so Shabbat is our commandment from Breshit, it's our commandment that originates from Breshit when God took a rest after his 6 days of labor, whereas Shemini Atzeret is coming at us from the end of it's attached to the end of the period. The end. I don't want to say it's attached to the holiday. It's attached to the period at the end of a joyous festival,
Mm-hmm.
and yet another one day. And I think that that's distinguished from the Shabbat environment, where the Shabbat is the relief and the rest and the communal of God, whereas Shemini Atzeret is we've been in the times of the temple, we've been communing with each other and with God in the temple in those days. Otherwise, whenever we can get together, but it's been a joyous period, and we're tacking on another day of assembly, if you will, like you said. And
Yeah.
there's a Rashi commentary that's consistent with my thought, but I'll give you that much abridged thought, and I won't belabor my comment more than it's a different environment. It comes from a different source. It comes
Thank
from
you.
the joy.
Yeah. As I think about this further, what Barry was saying led me in another way of thinking about the stop and gather. This is also the end of the fall holiday season. So we are stopping Sukkot in particular, but also to some extent Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and all of those, that period of we're either in a holiday or we are recovering from a holiday or we're getting ready for a holiday. And now we're stopping with all that and we are just focused on gathering. We are not, there's, as we'll talk about further, there are no ritual objects for Shemini Atzeret. There are
Thank you.
No leshe basu.
right. There are no foods for Shemini Atzeret. I mean, it's not like it's a fast day, but there are no specific foods for Shemini Atzeret. So it's just a day where we stop with all the other holiday mishigas and focus on gathering.
Could it also have something to do with the fact that the next day we begin the Torah from the beginning again? We end and begin.
Yeah, that would be another layer of meaning that wasn't original to the holiday,
That would be galut.
but could be viewed as part of it now. And the only reason I say it wasn't original to the holiday is that Simchat Torah as a separate holiday where we finish the Torah and start it again doesn't start until like the 900s or so. So Shemini Atzeret was developed well before Simchat Torah came along. However, when Simchat Torah did come along, we can then add that as another layer of meaning to the idea of Shemini Atzeret as stopping and gathering and focused on the Torah, because in Israel and for the Reformed community outside of Israel, Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are on the same day now that Simchat Torah has become a thing. So yes, you could also look at it that way, and that would be another layer of meaning for today.
David, it also makes me think about, I'm glad you mentioned about Simchas Torah, but I think about obviously October 7th and how heinous Hamas and all their gang were, because they attacked on the most joyous, if not the most joyous day of our calendar. But yet in this country, in the diaspora, it was actually Shemini Atzeret, which is a little less joyous day because we have Yisker, as we'll go into it, and you know, we pray for rain and all of that. So I just think that these awful people know their Hebrew calendar, know the ritual calendar, because there's no coincidence they chose the most joyous day, and that's why it's called the Black Sabbath. So, I mean, the whole juxtaposition of Shemini Atzeret with Simchas Torah, whether you're in Israel or outside of Israel, I think has a greater significance in 2020.
Yes, 2024 is now a different experience than 2022 certainly was.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on. So, when is Shemini Atzeret? A couple different ways of answering this question, depending on what exactly you're looking for. It's on the 8th day of Sukkot. It is on Tishrei, the 22nd of Tishrei. That would be the date on the Jewish calendar, because Sukkot starts on the 15th of Tishrei. It is sometime in September or October. It is the day before Simchat Torah, unless you are Reform or in Israel, in which case it is also on Simchat Torah. So different ways of looking at it, but that gives the general idea as to when you will find Shemini Atzeret, depending on your vantage point. All right. So why do we have Shemini Atzeret? As is often the case, the answer is because it says so in the Torah.
Yeah, King says so.
Okay.
So this is what it says about Shemini Atzeret. In Leviticus, it says, "Say to the Israelite people, on the 15th day of the 7th month, that would be the month of Tishrei, it shall be a feast of booths to Adonai to last 7 days. The first day shall be a sacred occasion, and you shall not work at your occupations. Then 7 days you shall bring offerings of fire to God. And on the 8th day, you shall observe a sacred occasion and bring an offering by fire to God. It is a solemn gathering, and you shall work at your occupations." So I know. Then it says solemn. Let's see what it. That is the translation for Atzeret. Today it's not so solemn. One can argue not solemn is even necessarily part of the translation of Atzeret. So that's what we know about Shemini Atzeret so far. It is a holy time, different from the rest of the year. You are supposed to bring an offering by fire to God. That is assuming that there is the tabernacle or the temple. You should not go about setting things on fire today because it says so in the Torah. That's not what it means today. And it is a gathering, and you shouldn't work at your occupations. So this might raise a question of what kind of fire offering does the Torah have in mind?
What's the Hebrew word?
Sir?
What's the Hebrew word
For
the fire offering?
Isha.
And that would be found elsewhere to help us define it.
So it says that on solemn gathering, you should not work out your occupations. All right, this we have seen before. So you shall present a burnt offering, an offering by fire of pleasing odor to God. Humans get the food, God gets the smell. 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 yearling lambs without blemish, the meal offerings and libations for the bull, the ram, and the lambs in the quantities prescribed, and 1 goat for a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering, its meal offering and libation. And all of these you shall offer to God at the stated times, in addition to everything else that you're supposed to offer. So basically, what the Torah is giving us is the sacred barbecue menu for Shemini Atzeret. However, now that we don't have the temple, we can't offer these sacrifices anymore. So instead, this becomes part of the Torah reading for Shemini Atzeret, and actually Simchat Torah, where we read about this as the maftir from the second Torah, instead of being able to do it itself.
So if we don't get the barbecue from the temple, are we allowed to cook on that day?
Yes. You can cook on Chag, on Shemini Atzeret, and you can carry on Shemini Atzeret. Two ways in which Shemini Atzeret is different from Shabbat. Technically, if you're cooking on Shemini Atzeret, you should be cooking for Shemini Atzeret. So if you're planning on cooking on this year, Wednesday night and Thursday, for Thursday night, Friday, have a little nibble of whatever it is before the sun goes down on Thursday, so that you have been cooking for Shemini Atzeret itself, if this is important to you. And you can also do an Eruv Tashilin. And if you want to know more about what that is, let me know. All right, other questions about Shemini Atzeret in the Torah?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Why was a sin offering prescribed on Shemini Atzeret?
Yeah, so there's a sin offering. So pause, rewind, play. This description of the sacrifice for Shemini Atzeret from Numbers chapter 29 and chapter 28 and 29 of the book of Numbers describe the daily offerings, the Shabbat offerings, the new moon / Rosh Chodesh offerings, and the festival offerings. Every festival offering, or every festival, has a goat as part of the sin offerings. It's not just Yom Kippur, although it's there too. So my understanding of why that is that in case the Israelite community had sinned, which, somebody had probably messed up at some point, we're going to offer a sin offering on behalf of the community so that we are all in the clear to celebrate the holiday. And hopefully whoever had messed up had figured out how to make peace between them and whoever they had offended, so that person could then go into the holiday with a joyous, full heart and not weighed down by their own personal mistakes and issues with other people.
David, I always thought
Thank you.
that was like breaking the glass under a chuppah at a wedding. You always have to remember no matter how joyous the day, you have to remember about something that's sad, if you will. And the sin offering lets us know that there is something sad and that somebody at some point may have sinned.
Yeah, that is another way of looking at it. The breaking of a glass at a wedding, that custom developed according to the Talmud because there was a rabbi who felt like the partying was getting out. And so he broke an expensive glass at the wedding reception to get everybody's attention and to be like, whoa, calm down, y'all. And then there was another situation of someone else who broke a glass, and from there it developed into more of a ritual, and a whole host of associations got attached to it. But that, what you're saying, would go well with that original origin of breaking glass at a wedding. of us being festive, but not too festive.
David, why is Yizkor said on Shemini Atzeret?
Yeah. So Yizkor is, and we'll get to this later, but by that point we might be moving quicker, so I'll talk about it now. Yizkor is an extra part of the service where we zocher, where we remember people in our lives who have died. And it's added to the end of the three pilgrimage festivals, on the last day of Shavuot, the last day of Passover, and Shemini Atzeret, which is basically, depending how you look at it, the last day of Sukkot. And then it's also in Yom Kippur, because that's the last day of the high holidays. And the thinking is that the people that we have lost, we are probably especially thinking about them at holidays, because we likely have some extra memories associated with them in the holidays. So this gives us a time to channel that remembering, since we're quite likely already thinking about them anyway. So it's not like, so we can have a time for remembering, and then hopefully that will allow us to celebrate the rest of the holiday with a little bit more joy in our heart, even if not completely.
Thank you.
David?
Yeah.
So obviously, there's a specific Torah reading and Haftorah associated with Shemini Atzeret, and then on Simchat Torah, I know we read from the end of Deuteronomy, and then from beginning of Bereshit, and then I think the book of Joshua. I know there's a special Haftorah for that. So how would they do it in Israel when the holidays combine? Would they read all of those parashot, or I'm just kind of curious, because it's very, tied to the specific two holidays in our world.
Yeah. I'm not totally sure. Some of the pieces you can just like you can do Yizkor and Hakafot. But what they do about Haftorah and Torah reading, I will have to investigate and hopefully have an answer tomorrow in the follow-up email.
Thank you, David. I know that's like a whole other class. I didn't mean to get off track, but it just really is a curiosity. So thank you so much in advance.
I was thinking about the same thing.
Yeah, these are good questions.
Great minds working in the same direction.
Okay. And we're getting to that time when I sometimes disappear, so if I do, I apologize. I'll be back. So.
It got quiet.
David got frozen. Must be
Yeah,
snowing out his way.
frozen, David.
Just said he would be back, that it was gonna go off and he'd be back.
Yeah.
Maybe, is that his Zoom that he only has 30 some minutes or something?
He's
I don't
booting
know
up again.
what it is.
Okay. But you're
I-
back,
Yes.
right?
That was quicker
He's
than
back.
investing.
Yeah.
Could be the Iranians, the hackers.
Uh-oh.
Wow.
Lost him again.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, he's back.
Just screen sharing. All right. So it always works much better after that happens. All right, so here we go. So if Shemini Atzeret was about sacrifices, and now we can't do that, what do we do on Shemini Atzeret?
Right.
So we actually had this situation already in biblical times, because after the Babylonians destroyed the first temple and exiled the Jews, when the Persians took over Babylonia and let the Jews come back, the second temple had not yet been built, but under Ezra and Nehemiah, the Judeans had learned about Sukkot and Shemini Atzeret. And so we read in the book of Nehemiah that they made booths, they dwelt in the booths, no lulav and etrog at that point, but that was last week's class. And there was Torah reading and a solemn gathering on the 8th day, which again we have Hashmini Atzeret. So that's that Atzeret word as being here translated as solemn gathering. So for them, it was a time of gathering.
Wait, David,
Yes.
but it's really 7 days rather than 8, and because Israel, they have combined with Shemini Atzeret and Simchas Torah, but we are, since we're outside, it's separated, right?
In Israel and outside of Israel, Sukkot is a 7-day holiday.
Right.
The difference is whether or not the first and second day is considered full festival. Yontif in Yiddish, Chag in Hebrew. The question then becomes, is it an 8-day holiday or a 9-day holiday? And by holiday, I mean holiday period. Shemini Atzeret is kind of part of Sukkot, kind of not. Does that clarify? I'll take that as a yes. Okay. So Shemini Atzeret is like other holidays, other festivals, insofar as it has evening and morning services with special festival ways of chanting of the Nusach. It has the opportunity to have special meals with friends and family or family. On the other hand, it's not like the other festivals. There are no special foods for Shemini Atzeret. There are no special ritual objects. The closest thing to an appropriate food would be fall harvest foods, because Sukkot is a fall harvest holiday. So now let's dig in further and talk about how Shemini Atzeret is similar and different from Sukkot. To be different. So, on the one hand, Shemini Atzeret is not Sukkot. We wave lulav and etrog on Sukkot. We don't use them on Shemini Atzeret. The name for the holiday that we use on Sukkot is Chag HaSukkot. The one that we use during the festival Kiddush and the Musaf Amidah is Hashmini Chag Atzeret. On the other hand,
I don't understand.
You don't understand, Charles?
Well, maybe I'm misreading this. I'm sorry. I was sort of speaking to myself. It came across, but it's just, you're saying it's not Sukkah. I understand, but if we wave lulav and etrog on Sukkot.
Well, it's
Oh,
we
hold
don't
on.
use
I
It's an
lulav,
error.
etrog
It's a
outside, so-
typo. It's a typo,
It's a typo.
Charles.
It's a
Typo.
typo. Thank you for catching it before that's on the internet forever.
it's a typo.
All right.
I'm glad you caught that before future people were confused and I was not there to unconfuse them. Thank you.
Well, that's what I thought, but that's why I said I wasn't sure.
I appreciate it. All right. So yes. As written, it is a very confusing sentence. We do wave lulav and etrog on Sukkot, but not on Shabbat. We don't use them on Shemini Atzeret. So it's not the same thing as Sukkot.
We don't sit in the Sukkot.
That's the other thing that should have gone in that paragraph too. So on the other hand, because Shemini Atzeret is right after Sukkot ends, the traditional tune for Mi Chamocha is the same in the festival evening service. And the nickname for both Sukkot and Shemini Atzeret is Man Simchatenu, the time of our happiness. And we have here an example of the Sukkot melody and Shemini Atzeret melody for Mi Chamocha being done by Cantor Roland Simmons in Houston with the Na'anuim tune. Now, whether or not we eat in a sukkah on Shemini Atzeret is more controversial. There was some argument about this. Some said we should, some said we shouldn't. And the compromise was that you can eat in the sukkah because it's still up since you haven't taken it down. But you don't say a blessing for eating in the sukkah, which is something you do on Sukkot, because it's not Sukkot anymore and there's no command to eat in the sukkah on Shemini Atzeret. Of course, if it's raining, you certainly don't eat in the sukkah, even if it is Sukkot. All right, comparing Shemini Atzeret to the other last days of the festivals. So as we talked about, there's Yizkor on the last day of Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, which is Shemini Atzeret, biblically speaking, as well as Yom Kippur. Also, the Torah reading is the same, mostly. For the last day of Passover, the last day of Passover and the last day of Shavuot are the same. And that Torah reading is the bulk of the Shemini Atzeret Torah reading with a little bit added at the beginning. Speaking of which, what is the Torah reading for Shemini Atzeret? So the Torah reading is from Deuteronomy, and it's the Deuteronomy version of the festivals of Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot, the 3 pilgrimage holidays. And then, well, that Torah reading is the same on the last day of each of those 3 festivals. On Shemini Atzeret, we add from chapter 14, the beginning of chapter 15, because it talks about providing joy to people who are less privileged, I guess, to use a modern term, during this particular harvest festival. On Shemini Atzeret, when Shemini Atzeret is a weekday, which it is this year, it's Wednesday night and Thursday, so this Torah reading will be Thursday morning this week. These Torah readings are broken up into 5 aliyot, 5 Torah readings. When it's on Shabbat, these Torah readings are broken up into 7. Same verses, just divided up differently. The maftir is what we saw before about the sacrifice for Shemini Atzeret in biblical times, because we're no longer doing it. And that maftir is also the same on Simchat Torah, which in Israel, and if you're Reform, it's the same day, so we only do it once. The Haftorah, and then we'll take a break for questions, comes from 1 Kings chapter 8. And it talks about how King Solomon dedicated the first temple during the holiday of Sukkot. But it's chosen for Shemini Atzeret because there's a verse at the end, verse 66, that talks about the 8th day at the end of Sukkot. And that's Shemini Atzeret. So this verse also gives us evidence that there were Jews in the land of Israel dedicating a temple 3,000 years ago. So Shemini Atzeret doesn't come up all that often in the Bible. I think we've now seen it all 4 times where it's actually mentioned, from Leviticus, Numbers, First Kings, and Nehemiah. All right. We just went through a lot. What questions are there so far?
Why did why in Israel did they combine the 2, Shemini Atzeret and Simchat Torah make it the same day?
Yeah, so they do that because the way that the calendar was originally done was that at the beginning of a month, when there was a new moon, multiple witnesses would have to go to Jerusalem and tell the Sanhedrin, the High Court, we saw a new moon.
Okay.
And then the news would be spread from Jerusalem throughout the land of Israel and also beyond the land of Israel.
Okay, so it was difficult. That's it. Yeah, I got
So
it.
it's a matter of doubt that possibly if you're not living in Israel, you didn't get the news on the right day, which means that you might not have started your month on the right day. So the 22nd of Tishrei, which is when Shemini Atzeret is, you might actually be celebrating that on the 23rd of Tishrei. So just in case, we'll make Shemini Atzeret a 2-day holiday outside of Israel. And then when Simchat Torah became a thing, that became the second day of Shemini Atzeret.
David, is there anything in the Bible where they talk about finishing the Torah reading and restarting it at the same time?
Nope.
So they just finish reading it and then the next day or whatever start reading it all over again?
I mean,
in ancient times?
In biblical times, we barely, think about the fourth wall in theater or film. Like, the fourth wall is the camera. So there are the 3 walls of the stage, and then you don't want to break the fourth wall and talk to the audience. So the Bible doesn't know that it's the Bible. So it doesn't talk up, at the very end, we get some discussion about Ezra reading verses reading from this Torah to everybody. In ancient times, in the land of Israel, they had a 3-year cycle, sort of like the triennial cycle today, except back then it was that you would read the first parsha for 3 weeks in a row, and then the next parsha for 3 weeks in a row, and after 3 years you'd finish the Torah and start all over again. And then in Babylonia they're like, that's silly, let's just do it all in 1 week. And so in Babylonia, after the Talmud was finished in the Gaonic period, around the 900s, 1000s or so, they start getting through the entire Torah in 1 year. And then they say, that extra day of Shemini Atzeret, we'll call that Simchat Torah. I will send out a source sheet about the origins of Simchat Torah. I taught this last year, but I recognize that was a full year ago. And so I know I've forgotten much of what was in there. But hopefully that will clarify how Simchat Torah came to be. There was a question in the chat about, now that the calendar has been fixed in 358 CE by Hillel II, and we know when the holidays are, can't we just dispense with the extra day? And that's what the Reform movement did. They said, we started this for a reason. The reason no longer holds. Let's get rid of the thing that we started because of the reason that no longer holds. And the conservative and Orthodox movement said, no, it is a tradition. And we will keep our traditions even if we recognize that the original reasons for the traditions no longer hold. Incidentally, I will be sending out this source sheet and the Simchat Torah source sheet. If you do not have my email, if you're not getting emails directly from me, please put your email in the chat so I can make sure you get this information.
No, that raises one point that I keep coming up against, and that is the revision of history, because there are things in the Torah that people find very uncomfortable with, and they would like not to include them in the Siddur or even be reminded of them. Things like the sacrifices and the wars, etc. And this is just another example of trying to rewrite history to some extent, if you will. And yet, this is where we came from originally. This is what we descended from. And why should we get rid of the things that brought us to where we are today?
Great.
Fair enough.
Yes.
All right. As it says in Pirkei Avot, the day is short and the work is long. So I'm going to keep going. And then if there's time, we'll do questions afterwards. And perhaps we'll have a demonstration of one of these prayers after 9 o'clock for those who want to stick around. So, are there special prayers on Shemini Atzeret? Yes. Because Shemini Atzeret marks the beginning of the rainy season in the land of Israel, we start adding the line Mashiv Haruch Marit Hagashem, that God is the causer of the wind to blow and the rain to fall, to the second paragraph, the Gvura blessing of every Amidah until the first day of Passover. However, we don't add that at the beginning of Shemini Atzeret. It only starts at Musaf after the Torah reading, and we introduce it with a special prayer called Geshem, calling for God to remember our biblical ancestors, their experiences with water, and thus for God to send rain to us. And we'll hear Geshem after 9 o'clock for those who want to stick around. We also have a special name for Shemini Atzeret, Hashmini Chag Atzeret Hazeh, in the festival evening Kiddush and the Musaf Amidah. And the Musaf Amidah refers to the sacrifices brought on Shemini Atzeret. Some people add Psalm 65 on Shemini Atzeret when they do the Psalm of the day. And that is probably because of the references to rain and harvests, which is one of the big ideas of Shemini Atzeret. All right, speaking of rain, there is a children's book called Maya Prays for Rain. There are almost no children's books about Shemini Atzeret, but this is the best one out there in my opinion. If you have another one, you are happy, please tell me about it and I can add it to my collection. It's about a girl who doesn't want rain to start praying for rain because everybody in her neighborhood has plans that would be ruined by rain. And so she asked the rabbi to cancel the prayer, but he explains that the rain they're praying for will fall in Israel, so she's okay with praying for rain at that point. Speaking of this, Avram Infeld was the International Hillel president, 2003 to 2006, and he tells a story from his childhood in South Africa about he was confused because, as he says, nobody in South Africa wants rain in October, but his father assured him that their rain falls in Israel. As I said, one of the big ideas of Shemini Atzeret is water access in Israel. So JNF, the Jewish National Fund, works on this issue today. And there's a site if you want to learn more about that. And Israel has also done a lot to conserve its water resources and share its technology in this area with other developing countries, like deep drip irrigation, desalinization, and water recycling, which Israel now leads the world by recycling 85% of its water.
Wow.
So they are serious about that. There's a PJ Library mini podcast episode about Shemini Atzeret and rain. And then there's another big idea. So the other big idea is that Rashi, who's a French commentator, someday we'll talk about Rashi, says that this is like a situation where a king has had a party for a certain number of days, and then when it's time for everybody to leave, he's like, please stay with me just one more day. And because it's very hard for me to part with you. So Rashi here is quoting from Pesik to Darav Kahana, Bamidbar Rabbah, and the Babylonian Talmud, some various other books of Midrash and the Talmud that also have basically the same story. Also, and I'm noticing that there are 70 bowls, according to the Book of Numbers, that are offered as the Sukkot offerings over the 7 days of Sukkot, but there's only one for Shemini Atzeret. So, since it was thought that in biblical times there were 70 nations, the pieces were put together to have a picture of Sukkot is when we are thinking about everybody, and Shemini Atzeret is when we're focusing on our relationship with God. So Sukkot is still a time for hosting lots of people and having large meals. And Shemini Atzeret gives us one more day to not focus on the rituals or the specific foods, but just have time together with each other and with God. So that is the thinking for that. All right, continuing along. Are there special dances for Shemini Atzeret? No. However, there is a verse, Ushaftamayim b'sason mimayne hayeshua, which is part of Havdalah, and it does have an Israeli dance. So you can see that here. And then finally, we get to the appendices. So Appendix A is Shemini Atzeret in the book The Observant Life, and you can see what it has to say about candle lighting and everything else. And then we have the text of Geshem. So there are male-centric versions, egalitarian versions, and a Sephardic version, and that is it. And we're actually running a little bit ahead of schedule. So, Abba, if you want to sing Geshem now, I think we have a few minutes.
Okay. So it starts with the first paragraph of the Musaf Hamidah with the special melody, but I'll go right into the even more special melody for the piyut. Eloheinu Elokei Avoteinu, Zechor nimshach acharecha kamayim, Berakto ka'etz shatul al palgei mayim, Diganto itzalto me'eshu mimayim, Darashto kizor al kol mayim, Baburo al timna mayim. I'll just do another one in a little higher version. They tend to alternate. Zechor nolad b'misorat yiku yukach na ma'ad mayim, v'sachta leoro v'shachato lishpoch tamo gamayim, ziher gam hu lishpoch lev kamayim, chafar umatzah beirod mayim, b'sid kochon chashrat mayim. So each of these extra little lines I'm reading, for Abraham's sake, don't withhold. For Isaac's sake, grant the gift of water. For Jacob's sake, don't withhold. For Moses' sake, grant the gift of water. For Aaron's sake, don't withhold. For the people of Israel's sake, grant the gift of water. And then it ends, She'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu mashivat ruach umorida gashem, which will do the entire winter. Libracha velo liklala, for blessing and not a curse, for life not death. L'chaim velo lamavet, for abundance and not famine. L'sova velo lirazon, amen, amen. And that is the short and sweet version of Geshem.
Thank you.
Yasher Koach.
Nice.
After that was wonderful. I just have to ask you, the introductory part of the Amidah in Musaf, prior to getting to that, do you use High Holy Day Nusach for that?
Funny you should ask that. There's a little bit of a machloket around the JTS, or at least there was when I was there 45 years ago, a little machloket about that around the JTS Cantorial School. I'm sitting here with a pile of half a dozen resource books, and I would say they're fairly evenly divided between that.
So it's the Chazan's discretion is what you're telling us.
or which teacher the Chazan chooses to follow for which particular machloket.
Well, thank you, and thank you for that beautiful rendition of the piyut. That was very lovely.
My pleasure. Thank you for being interested in it.
How come they don't mention Miriam?
Well, I'm doing from the 1985 Siddur Sim Shalom. I'm sure that Siddur Lev Shalem, which is incredibly egalitarian in every other respect, I'm sure that they've egalitarianized, to probably invent a new word, Tal and Geshem also. But I had a few marks in this book, and my Lev Shalem is new enough that I haven't added any marks to it. So I figured in front of a group I would play it safe and use my marked up Siddur.
You know, it's a
But I will check. You've intrigued me. I will check and see if they even managed to make. Chances are, if they hold to what they've done with everything else, they'll say Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah, right.
That sort of thing.
They,
This-
you'll see it in the source sheet. The Lev Shoim has a traditional male-only version, which I'm showing now on the screen. 2 pages of that, and then a newer egalitarian version.
Oh,
where
that's
Miriam
nice.
does get a mention.
Cool.
Yeah,
And-
and that sounds great.
And then there's the Sephardic version, which doesn't talk about males or females.
If you allow me to interject, in Torah, there's an inference, and in commentary, there's an outright statement that Miriam has a very special relationship with water.
That's true.
So that's a profound question. That's a great question. Why isn't
Yeah.
Miriam mentioned? It's
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
Miriam's related to wells, not to the pouring down of rain, as far as I understand it.
she's related to water, period.
So yes.
Flinty Rock.
So David, we pray for this rain, Mashi Vorshik Hagashem. It refers to the rain in Israel. But then in the Siddur, we also have something that is said starting December 15th. Doesn't that refer to precipitation in this area of the world? I can't remember the exact wording.
I know
of
what
it
you're
now.
talking about. It's in the
Yeah.
weekday Amidah.
Right.
Yes.
I will check on the difference of that and get back to you.
Okay.
All right. So recognizing the time,
Talamatar, yeah, right.
I'm going to stop the recording.